Great. So thank you so much for joining me. My name is Shannon Thomasian. I'm the Senior SEO Manager here at Thrive. And this webinar is going to be discussing local SEO tips for multiple location businesses. It's definitely a mouthful. First, just a little bit about me. My name is Shannon Thomasian. That is pronounced Thomasian. And yes, I have a lot of fun hearing people try to pronounce it. So any guesses are always welcome. I actually stumbled upon digital marketing on accident in 2014 and just been hooked ever since. I really enjoy challenges and solving mysteries. And I have been working with Thrive coming up on 3 years here in November of this year. I have a wide range of experience working from franchise locations, e-commerce, small business, but local SEO has really been kind of at the heart of everything that I enjoy doing. In my personal time, I enjoy escape rooms, solving mysteries, Zumba, and bike rides. And this is a picture of me with the president of our company, Matt Bowman, at our company retreat. So let's start by talking about what we mean when we say multiple locations. This strategy is really going to apply to you if you have multiple physical stores or locations. So example, Home Depot, Bed Bath & Beyond, but doesn't necessarily have to be a big brand chain. If you serve multiple areas, even if you don't have a physical store, so a plumber that comes to your home, HVAC technician, that kind of thing. And if you're a directory that aggregates local businesses, so a good example would be Angie's List. Now, whether you have 2 or 1,000 locations, it's really crucial to present to Google and the other search engines the correct information and making sure that you're targeting your local areas correctly. Just making sure that you do that well, it helps the search engines distinguish between where you're located and present the right ones to the right people at the right time. So a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing, some are pretty basic foundational SEO pieces, whether you have multiple locations or not, but will include some additional insight to fit if you have multiple locations. So just a quick kind of gathering of the group and just seeing, you know, if there's any way that I can cater this presentation to fit your needs. So if you can drop in the chat which one of these fits your business, either 1, 2, or 3, that may help me kind of guide you in the right direction depending on who we have the most of. So I'll give you maybe a couple minutes just to drop those in the chat window. Great, so it looks like we have mostly 1s and 2s, mostly 2s, which is good. Service area businesses, that's a common one. Great, thank you for that. So here's just kind of the quick cliff notes on what we're going to be going over today. So step 1 is just building out pages for each location. Now, when you do that, you want to really make sure that you're hammering in on some of the foundational SEO pieces. So keyword research, SERP analysis, competitive analysis, because your competitors are going to be different in each area that you service. So that's kind of a tricky one too. We also want to make sure that we're creating a logical URL structures for users as well as Google. Step 2, optimize for CRO, content, and SEO. And we'll talk about each one of those things individually. Step 3 is kind of one of the most important ones, is your Google My Business profile. And probably if there's one thing that you can take away from this presentation, it's follow Google's guidelines or else. When we say it, we really mean it. They have been suspending locations kind of on a rampage lately, so you just want to make sure that you're following as best as you can Google's best practices, and there's tons of documentation out there to help you, but I'll go over some of that. Step 4 is build local listings for each location and making sure that all of your listings are consistent across the board. And step 5, gather positive reviews. So we kind of want to take, everything full circle from the very beginning about attracting your clients. And then once they become a client, making sure, that they gather leave positive reviews for you so that you can gather even more clients. Excellent. So we'll start with building out pages for each location. So keyword research is really going to help you understand what users are typing into a search query. It's going to help you gauge how much potential traffic you can capture if you do start to rank well for the keywords that you're looking at. You can use a variety of different tools. Some great ones here are Google Ads Keyword Planner Tool, SEMrush, Moz, and Ahrefs. I'm a little bit old school, so I prefer to take any information directly from Google whenever I can. So I typically use Google Ads Keyword Planner. Now you do have to have an active campaign set up, but it is a free tool as long as you have a campaign set up. It can be a paused campaign, so that's the tricky part. Some things that you want to look at when you're doing keyword research is search volume. That's the amount of people that are typing that query, and they do an average monthly. Keyword difficulty is going to give you an idea of how difficult it would be to rank for that keyword. And competition, which of course is going to be different in every area. So say that, you're searching Dallas and you're searching Arlington. You want to make sure that you do keyword research for each location that you service, because it's going to be different depending on where you are. And you want to make sure that you add, you look at it with geo modifiers and without. And geo modifiers is just, the addition of your city or the area that you service. So an example would be fencing contractors, people who are building fences. There are 2 separate keyword terms for that. It would be fencing contractors and then fencing contractors Dallas, Texas, or fencing contractors Arlington, whatever you're trying to target. And you do want to make sure that you have that geo modifier. In most cases, the search engines won't understand where you're located without it. Excellent. So SERP research. Now, SERP is one of those tricky industry terms. It stands for Search Engine Results Page. So anytime that you're doing keyword research, you always want to type your keyword into Google and take a look at the types of results coming back. This is really important for user intent. There are going to be a lot of different intentions behind different queries. So here's some examples of what we mean by intent. There are specific keywords for transactional type queries. So a user wants to buy something. They're going to probably type in something like buy fencing, buy fences, or fencing installation contractor. And you can add certain long tail additions to your keywords. So a good example, especially for service area businesses, is adding the word companies or services. Those are always good additional ones to look at. Now, DIY queries, example, how to build a fence, are people looking to do things themselves, but they may want some insight on how to do that. Now, that may not necessarily be valuable to you as a business owner because, obviously you want to be able to come out and do that service for them versus them doing it themselves. And advice type queries. So what type of fence is best for dogs? So this step is really, really important because not only will you be able to see the different types of intent when you Google the keyword that you're trying to rank for, but you'll also be able to see what Google sees as most relevant. Sometimes they'll show videos in search results. Sometimes they'll show quick answers in search results. So you kind of just want to gauge the landscape of the SERP. And in the example of fencing, that's kind of my favorite one that I like to look at, because if you actually Google the word fencing, sometimes they don't actually know what you're looking for. Are you talking about fencing the sport? Are you talking about fencing contractors? Do you want to build a fence? So they'll show a variety of different results, and it's important to know what Google sees so that you can know that you're targeting the right thing. And a competitive analysis is going to be important for each location that you serve because it's going to be different depending on what area you're in. It's also important to keep in mind that Google might see your competitors differently than what you think your competitors are. And really the only way to know that is to Google your keyword and see who comes up. So take a look at who comes up first in search results, and those are technically your competitors from an SEO perspective. Now, the competitive analysis is also going to help you determine the order of priority in your SEO campaigns. There's a lot of different pieces to the bigger SEO puzzle, and you want to make sure that you're tackling things in order of highest priority. When it comes to on-site SEO, you can compare your rankings and your content with that of your competitors. You can discover a lot of content opportunities where you can outrank them and work that into your content strategy. So maybe there's another fencing contractor who doesn't have content written about a white picket fence. And that's something that you typically want to build as a fencing contractor. You'd want to use that opportunity to go ahead and try to target that. From an offsite SEO perspective, you can always do a competitive backlink profile analysis. And that is really, really kind of an interesting top secret way to just find out what backlinks your competitors have and which ones you can target and add to your backlink strategy. Doesn't always necessarily mean that you can acquire that same link, but you may be able to acquire a similar one, or you may find out that, hey, they were on the news for some sort of initiative that they were driving, or they were involved in a charity event that brought them a link. Maybe we can do something similar. And that's also really valuable because as long as you're building quality, relevant links, you are building your trust and authority in Google. And again, if you have multiple locations, you are going to want to complete this competitive landscape analysis for each location. Your competitors are going to be different for each area that you service. So the next step is creating a logical URL structure. You want to make sure that your URL structure is easy to navigate for users and easy for search engines to understand. So here are a couple examples of what we mean. Example.com would be your domain /locations, and that would list all of your locations. Another example would be /Texas, or all of the locations that you offer in Texas. And then, drilling down on another level, /location, /Texas, /Dallas. Now, it's really important as you start to grow your business and you add more locations that you keep this system consistent. You don't want it to be all over the place. It is ideal also for national clients, this kind of location /Texas, /Dallas. But you may want to consider subdomains, subdirectories, and different languages for international, if that's something that applies to you. And they will all impact how you rank based on location and language. Great. So next you're going to want to optimize for CRO, content, and SEO. And this is a lot. So it really helps to have somebody guide you through this and having an advocate for you that actually knows how to tie all of these things together to create really great content. So you're going to want to include your keywords within your title tag and meta descriptions. And what those are is when you Google, when you type a search keyword into Google, you'll see the result come up, and you'll see a title, and then you'll see information underneath. And that is how you really stand out amongst your competitors. You want to make sure that you have calls to actions, things that are going to entice the user to click your listing versus your competitor. You want to include the keywords throughout the content, and you want to make that semantically and using exact keywords. So just make it flow naturally. You don't want to overstuff your content with your keywords, anything like that. And you're going to want to go ahead and create pages for each product and service and location that you have. You're going to want to add service schema, product schema, local business schema, or organization schema wherever it applies. Schema is just an additional piece of code that feeds Google more information about what it is you do. So the more information that you can give Google, the better. And the more simple it's explained, that will also really, really help you. You're going to want to show your name, address, and phone number on your website if possible. Now, a lot of people had mentioned that they are service area business. Sometimes it's not always possible. But if you can list it, go ahead and do that. You're going to want to optimize your images. You're going to want to utilize internal linking. Make sure that your site speed has been optimized. Make sure your site is mobile friendly, and optimize your sitemap. And this is not an all-inclusive list. There's definitely a lot more to this. This is just kind of some of the basics from a local SEO perspective that you want to make sure you're hitting. And we are going to kind of talk about two different schools of thought. So on-site SEO is anything that can be placed on your website or adjusted on your website. Off-site SEO is going to be anything off-site. So you probably guessed that. But that's going to include things like links, social media signals, Google My Business, and other ranking factors that are really outside of the actual website. So some ways to optimize your content. If you have a service area business, make sure that you list the neighborhoods and the areas that you serve. Google can pick that up and then feed it to a user if they are in that area. Include keywords and geo modifiers, but make it sound natural. You know, don't just stuff it in there so that it pleases Google. It really kind of has to meet both criteria, and that can be a little bit complicated sometimes. It's a balance between writing for Google and writing for a user. When you're writing your content, you really want to understand your audience and know their pain points. So how does your service solve some of these pain points for customers? If they have to build a fence themselves and it's not something that they are good at or that they want to do, how would hiring a fencing contractor fix those? And then what makes you stand out from your competitor? Avoid industry jargon. That it can be complicated, especially if you're writing your own content, to remove yourself from your own industry and think like somebody who isn't involved in that industry. You really want to break up content blocks and make it easy for people to scan. So I also mentioned not like this super crowded slide, just break things up so that a user's eyes don't get weary and then they leave. Incorporate different forms of media, so images, videos. If you have a gallery or a portfolio of work, before and after are great for contractors. I think that that's a wonderful thing, especially when homeowners are looking for inspiration to remodel their home or something like that. You can always show before and afters. Just make sure that it's really, really high quality images. If you can make your reader feel something, that is also really powerful. So if you are a company that offers a service that keeps somebody safe, so maybe like a home security system, you can really just hit on that, keeping your family safe, those types of things that make a reader feel something. You're always going to want to keep the reading level low to make sure that you can target everybody and actually explain what you do very clearly in just a couple sentences. If it takes a paragraph to explain what your company does, then it's likely that they're not going to get that far. Don't assume that a user knows anything. You definitely need to tell them. Use interlinking, so link in between pages on your website. And make sure that you have clear and concise CTAs that align with your most valuable goals. And when we say CTAs, we mean calls to action. And you want to make it align with your most valuable goals. For example, if you prefer that people call you, you'll want to highlight that throughout the site. Some quick statistics on CTAs. It's estimated that only about 47% of websites have a clear call to action that takes a user 3 seconds or less to see. So you really want to make it stand out, make it catch a user's eye. If you can personalize or hyper target that CTA, that is even better, because it's found that it converts about 42% more than untargeted CTA. Next step, conversion rate optimization, and it kind of leads into this when we were talking about CTAs. You're going to want to just follow best practices for high converting landing pages. Your submission forms, keep them as short as possible. Every field, every second counts. You can lose a user's interest at any point in time during their journey. So you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to keep them on your page, keep them from getting distracted, especially in the world that we live in now, where we're always on our cell phones, and it could be easy for somebody to just put their cell phone down and go do something else. Your call to action buttons and your text, just be as specific as possible. Don't make a user think, don't make them search for it. You know, the ultimate goal of your site is typically to get somebody to check out or contact you, whatever it is. Just make sure that there are no barriers for users. When it comes to your background, your layout, and your headlines, speak in their words. So speak in a language that they will understand. And again, highlight pain points that you can solve if you can. Slideshows and videos. This is one that you want to be very, very careful of. One thing that I strongly don't recommend is autoplay videos. If a user is on your website and they are in a work environment and there's a video that all of a sudden starts playing, it can be very embarrassing to them, leaving them with a very bad taste in their mouth. Same with slideshows. If it's really distracting from the overall goal of the website, you'll just want to make sure that you consider that for a user. Upsells, cross-sells, and personalization. Now, Amazon is absolutely incredible at this. I don't know if you've ever noticed when you're on Amazon, you bought something and you'll see people always also buy, and that's a great way to upsell. The other thing that Amazon does that I think maybe you want to be careful with is something called defaults. So they will, if you go to purchase a video, it will automatically default to HD, which is the more expensive one. And you may or may not want to do that, just depending on how your users react to it, because obviously you're a business and you want to make more money, but you could lose trust with your users. So that's kind of one that you may want to approach carefully too. And the key here with multiple locations is really just making sure that when a user calls a phone number or they fill out a form, anything that requires getting contact information to the right location, just make sure that that's all routed correctly. And just remember that speed to lead is just as important as bringing traffic to your site. Once traffic comes to your website and if people aren't answering the phone or returning information on queries and form fills, get it returned to those prospects as soon as you can, because you never know if they are also sending forms to your competitor. So don't let them get to them before you can. Some other additional CRO tips: incentives work great. So if you can offer 5% off your next order, if you sign up for a newsletter, that kind of thing. Typically, if you stand back 10 feet from your screen, make sure that you can see your call to action. Have the button be specific. And sometimes you may want to reconsider if the button just says submit. A lot of people can see that as demanding. There's been some studies on that. Some other things that you want to evaluate is, does the background image make the text difficult to read? If you have the words free on your website, putting that in all caps so it stands out is also helpful. Make sure that it's easy to tell what service you're selling upon entering the website. So if you can have just a clear one sentence, fencing contractors, Dallas, Texas, that pretty much sums it up right there. So just in general, the key to conversion rate optimization is just avoiding distractions and keeping the user focused on the action that you want them to take. So make it stand out amongst the page. Next, we want to create and optimize our Google My Business profile for each location. Here are some general do's and don'ts, but there are some links in this presentation, which we will send if you just drop your email in the chat window. We will get it emailed out to you and you can actually access the links in this presentation. Google has really specific guidelines for each type of service area. Great, thank you. So some do's, definitely choose a relevant category. Use high resolution professional images. If you have photos of staff and your actual physical location, that is great. Use a local number in your Google My Business location. Encourage reviews. Use descriptions, and there's also a section where you can add products and services. This is really, really great information to feed Google. Interacts with your post section. You can think of that almost as a separate social media profile, but Google really likes it when you interact with their products. Don't use a URL that redirects to your website's URL. Use the actual URL itself. Try to avoid awkwardly stuffing keywords into your business name field. Just make it natural. One of the trickiest things for a lot of business owners is duplicate listings. So a lot of times we will see that maybe a different agency was managing a Google My Business, or the actual business owner doesn't have access to their own business listing. Make sure you always have access to your Google My Business listing and make sure that you're the owner, because then it helps you avoid situations where there's multiple listings floating out there for the same location. Especially when you're really trying to encourage reviews, you want to make sure that all the reviews go to one listing, because then you'll have more of them in one spot. Don't use any address for your business that isn't a physical storefront or an office space where you meet with customers. Google is also cracking down on virtual offices. So if you do have a virtual office, be aware that you have a struggle ahead of you. So here's what I was talking about in terms of Google My Business, different guidelines. So here's some helpful links for if you're a chain and a brand, departments within other businesses, so universities, institutions, and then one of the most tricky ones is doctors, lawyers, real estate agents who want their listing shown individually, but are also part of a bigger practice. So these are really, really helpful, and it's important that you read through these carefully to make sure that you're following Google's guidelines, because they will suspend your listing, and to get it reinstated can really cause a lot of headaches. So in addition to Google My Business, you're going to want to also build local listings for each location. You're going to want to make sure, number one, that you have consistency across each of these listings. So your name, address, phone number, and all needs to be consistent across the web. It must match what is listed on the website. It must match what is listed on the Google My Business. Even very slight changes like street being spelled out, or ST for an abbreviation of street, periods, commas, it should all be consistent. Now, from my understanding, Google has actually been a little bit more smart about this, about understanding these things. But in the end, the reason for this is that search engines are really all about confidence. They need to be confident in your business and the information that you are feeding them. Part of the reason that they make so much money is that they are serving users what users want to see. So it's very important to them as a business to make sure that they're serving credible information. So in order to build your confidence with search engines, you really have to make sure that they understand exactly who and where you are. And they're not always perfect, right? They're computers. So they're just ridiculously detail oriented. And that just means that as a robot's looking at this, they will notice even the slightest variations in a name or an address or a phone number. If your website address is HTTPS and not HTTP, make sure that that matches as well. So just all of those little minor details. And again, just really slight variations can hinder a search engine's confidence and make them less likely to want to show your listing to their users. Some tips on gathering positive reviews. You really want to make it easy for people to leave you a review. You want to ask as quickly as you possibly can after you've performed a service or provided a product, because it's still fresh in their minds and they're still, right afterwards, pretty happy, hopefully, with their services. Just ask for help. Try to build a relationship with your customers, and then the ask won't seem as difficult. You can offer incentives, but you need to be very, very careful with that. Google's policies clearly state that you cannot offer or accept money in exchange for reviews. So just make sure that you understand their review policies, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google, there'll be different policies depending on where you would like that review listed. If you are going to offer incentives, make sure that you're following the rules. Another great recommendation is using a service. So here at Thrive, we have something called Rise Reviews, and that will start an email campaign, send a text message already for you. Another great thing that you can do is respond to your reviews. Now that is, whether they're negative or positive reviews, it's always good to respond. Just say, hey, thank you so much for the feedback. It was a pleasure working with you. It just really shows that you care and that you're involved in these reviews. Here's some bonus tips for multiple locations. If you can avoid hopping agencies and stick with one agency, it's really going to help you out a lot. Do your research and find a great agency and stick with it. When you hop, when you make a habit of switching agencies often, you're more likely to have inconsistent name, address, and phone numbers. You're more likely to have just a lot of foundational SEO work being redone, which, every once in a while you do want to evaluate it, but kind of when you switch to a new agency, they'll typically do things the way that they have strategized versus the previous agency. And it's almost like, in a way, starting over. And just realize that sometimes you are going to have to make some compromises. So just knowing the difference between a best practice and something that you absolutely have to do to avoid a penalty with Google is going to be your best bet. I mean, Google has their best practices and their guidelines, and definitely when it comes to Google My Business, you want to make sure that you follow the rules. But sometimes you have to choose your battles, and as long as it isn't something that you have to compromise on that could result in a Google My Business suspension or a penalty with Google, there's a couple items that you can they definitely have some wiggle room. And another thing to note is that Google's guidelines and best practices do change often. So especially for Google My Business listings, that's why it's really valuable for you to have kind of a team of industry experts who stay on top of the latest changes. So extra resources, I saw that we had some emails dropped in the webinar chat. So thank you for that. If you want to drop your email address, we'll get you a copy of this presentation. Within the presentation, you'll see links to Google guidelines and best practices, and that's really going to help you, especially if you know, you're a lawyer or a medical practitioner and you actually want to read through those guidelines. They're all listed there for you. Also, feel free to contact me directly if you wish. I'm happy to discuss your specific situation one-on-one. So you can send me an email here at shannon@thriveagency.com. I'm always happy to do that. So I will open it up for questions. First question, can you set up a Google My Business for an artist who just has a mailing address? By mailing address, if you mean PO box, Google My Business will not accept PO boxes. For an artist, you can hide the address. You can put it in Google and hide it if that's something that you need to do. Does that answer your question, Lori? That's a really good question. And a lot of times people will, you know, have a service area business where they may be a plumber or a garage door repair company, and they run their business out of their house. In that case, you can hide the address in Google My Business. So just make sure to read through that guideline specifically. And I believe there'll be a resource to that back in the previous slide where there were links to Google My Business policy. Any other questions I can answer? I'll give you guys a few minutes to think of some good ones. Great, it looks like we got through that pretty quickly. I do have a game that we can play if everybody wants to get, you know, their brain working after lunch. But maybe we can take a vote to see if you're interested. It's just a logo game, and we can try and guess as many logos in 6 minutes. I will stop sharing so that we don't cheat. Is anybody interested in playing a game? Awesome. Well, I'll play with some coworkers later. Maybe I'll give it just a couple more minutes to see if we have any additional questions. And again, if you have a question that you want specifically answered, feel free to email me directly. I'm happy to answer them. Great, we'll go ahead and end it here. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope everybody has a safe rest of the week and into the weekend.